overly kind to empowered kindness. What can happen in 8 years? So this week I'm talking about my 8-year journey from overly kind to empowered kind. And just to give a little context, 8 years ago, I was in my previous relationship and I was going to be on psych meds for the remainder of the relationship in order to tolerate it. And I realized I'd probably be in the psych ward every so often, as had been the pattern, in order to be in this relationship. And so 8 years ago is when I took my first empowered kindness step and started to advocate for myself in a healthy way. And now we're 8 years later, and now it's a completely different world, a completely different relationship, and it's an empowered kindness that motivates me. So it's kind of interesting looking at the contrast of 8 years, and what that means is growing 1% at a time. And I'll say a lot of my challenges really stem from my own belief system and how those beliefs had kind of entrapped me in a situation. And so there was a lot of work to do on myself. So that's why we're talking about this really cool contrast, because this podcast is all towards overly kind women and kind of all transitioning us to be more empowered in our kindness. So let's talk about it. So I call overly kind the kind girl syndrome, or the kind girl bullseye. And now I want to talk about kindness as being an empowered kindness. So the overly kind syndrome is I was kind at my own expense all the time, and I was compelled to do that. I was always thinking of others more important than myself. And so that came at a very toxic cost to myself. Now I'm still kind, and I'm still kind at my own expense, but it's when I choose to be and when it's in alignment with me. And I'm happy to serve and give, but it's very conscious. Before, I was definitely over-giving all the time. I was definitely an over-giver. Now I give and I receive, and I'm good at receiving, and that's a skill set I had to learn. Before, I tolerated bad behavior and destructive patterns. And, my reasoning was like, oh gosh, this is my cross to carry, and this is what I'm meant to do. And, that belief system was not helpful. And now I don't tolerate patterns of destructiveness in myself or in others close to me. And I do let people be themselves, but I do have my boundaries with them. Before, I was very much externally validated, meaning that how other people felt about me and thought of me was super important to me. I wanted the church's support, my friends' support, all of those things, and that was super important to me. Now, I'm much more internally validated and true to myself and very aware, and ask my, body, soul, and everything, and be like, okay, where are we at? What do we need? And really connected in that way, whereas that internal validation and that peace within, that I'm being true to myself, is much more important than external validation. Before, I was having a lot of physical challenges. I had symptoms. I had reflux. I had Hashimoto's undiagnosed. They thought I had thyroid cancer. I had all sorts of I had plantar fasciitis. I had pelvic, I had a lot of physical challenges. And so it's very interesting, as I would say I'm physically connected and strong. That means that I listen to my body and its physical needs, because I had a lot of stored emotions that were unprocessed in my body that were not helping, and my body was trying to speak to me, but I was not listening, and it just got louder and louder. And so now I try to listen to my body and ask my body, like, okay, what do you need? Do you need rest? Do you need nourishment? Do you need time to yourself? What do you need? Where are you at? And I've also worked on becoming just a lot more strong. My immune system is so much stronger. My immune system, wow, it was like always struggling. So it's really interesting to see just the difference of the physically struggling all the time versus physically strong. Not that I don't have, physical challenges, but it's just at a much better, it's just so much better, and just being connected to my physical body. And then 8 years ago, emotionally struggling all the time. And how I was kind of going through that life was just trying to stuff any feelings that I couldn't I didn't want to deal with. And there were also within my past, there were feelings that were not allowed. Like, for example, anger was not allowed. That was a sin. And rage, definitely not allowed. And so I was only allowing like a certain range of feelings, and I was stuffing them all and not processing them. And I would say my overwhelming feelings that I was experiencing was fear because of the destructive relationship and walking on eggshells, and guilt because I was like always in trouble. And so I had allowed guilt to kind of reign in my life. And so that's where I was emotionally. And now I'm emotionally competent. And that just means I allow like all emotions. I don't really label them, oh, this is a good emotion, this is a bad emotion. There's some that are more comfortable than others, but they're all information. So I allow myself to feel those emotions and to process it and to get the information. Like, what are you trying to tell me? You know, what do I need to process, and allow it to flow through me, which is really interesting because if we resist an emotion, it doesn't go away. We're just battling it, and it can get stuck in us. And if we, then there's the other side where we can be very reactive emotionally. But I'm just talking about processing. And that means if we can sit in our feelings, emotions actually dissipate within like 90 seconds. Whether even shame, rage, all of those things, if we allow ourselves to like feel it and just where it's at in our body, what is it telling us, and just not judge it, like just feel it, it will process through our bodies. And that's how we process our feelings. So emotionally competent, able to process, and a lot more peace. Huge amount of peace versus like the fear and the guilt and probably repressed anger. so, and like I said, I wasn't allowing emotions, and now I process emotions. For me, my life was the kind girl, doing the right things, being a Christian, marrying a Christian guy. And really, the relationship was very destructive to me. And I ended up in the psych ward twice and got labeled bipolar at the time. And it was just a very challenging, awful situation. And so there wasn't mutuality in working things out. And so I chose a divorce. And then I just questioned myself. I questioned all the whys and questioned my beliefs that got me there, and all of my people pleasing and my serving, and really had to rediscover myself and healthy relationship with God and myself and others. And it was a process. So I created the Unravel notebook, and that was the process that helped me go from that situation to living a life abundantly as a realtor and a life coach, and really thriving in a beautiful marriage. And that's what I want to help others do as well, and create their life by intention to live brighter one day at a time. So 8 years ago, my nervous system, I was tightly strung. I was like on eggshells. I was tense. I was kind of in fight or flight a lot. And now my nervous system is calm. And it's very interesting just to feel that calmness within my nervous system. And that's a process. That's why I'm like taking an 8-year span, because it's been a process and I'm continuing to journey. But that's the difference between that. And I actually was talking to a gal the other day, and she's in an abusive relationship and choosing to stay in it for right now. And her nervous system was so tightly wound up. It's just like, just very tense, and you could just jittery. It's just, it does something to ourselves to remain in those fight or flight stage for too long. It like trains our body that's normal, and it's just a very intense, tightly strung place versus like a calm and a relaxed place. So another thing with overly kind is I knew others. Like I knew what my kids needed. I knew my husband's, what his needs, wants, desires. I knew that, but I didn't really know myself as far as like what did I need, want, and desire. In fact, I didn't even really allow that. Like I thought that was selfish to have needs, wants, and desires. I'm like, that's selfish. It's all about serving others, and I don't ascribe to that anymore. Now I do know myself, and I know others. And I allow for myself to have wants, needs, and desires. Wow, big difference. 8 years ago, I was a boundary mess. That means, again, I ignored my wants, needs, and desires regularly, and I never really advocated for myself. Like, this is what I need, and this is how I'm going to follow up on those needs, and I can take care of my needs, but I also have to, incorporate these practices or whatever I need into my life. Versus now, I can have boundaries and I can have requests, and I practice that. And the difference between a boundary and a request is like we can't change others, like we can't control others, but we can make requests. We could be like, hey, I would really like it if you did that because, that would help me out in this way as we go through this. And a boundary is more like if you continue to do this, then I am going to do this. It's not controlling the other person. It's saying what you're going to do in response. And it's to protect yourself emotionally, physically, however you need to do that. And that's the difference between like a boundary and a request. And honestly, I was a boundary mess 8 years ago, and I never knew how to do like a request or to deal with like a person that was a boundary destroyer or to set firm boundaries. Like I had no ability or tools to do that. I really love Terry Coles, the boundary boss, and we interviewed her on this podcast, and she has a new book out called, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's all about high functioning codependency. Fabulous. I'm so excited about that. But she really helped me understand what boundaries are, how to use them, and to go forward on that. And there's also some other great books on that. 8 years ago, I would just forgive others, but the trauma in me was increasing. And I didn't realize that by forgiving and not processing that I was increasing the trauma in my life. And so now I process my pain and I process my trauma as they're brought to me from either my past, like whatever it is, and I process those things. So 8 years ago, I definitely had a fear of my husband more than God, which is very interesting because I don't think I would have seen that then. I knew I was afraid all the time, but what I really was doing was elevating, fear of my husband over like what God says. And we are his children. God, universe, he loves us. There's this huge amount of love for us. And I had not really understood how much he loved us, and as his child, how he wants us to be in a safe environment, both emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And so now I'm more in line with love and God as far as like really experiencing and allowing myself to be loved by God. And that doesn't mean I'm perfect in any way, but he is much more, he's relational. And he's like, I feel like he looks at us like a good father would look at a 4 or 5-year-old child. He kind of looks at us with delight at our little quirkiness and our cute little ways. And yeah, where he knows we're all a little bit of a mess, and he still loves us. And so just really embracing that love, and then also choosing to love myself and then loving others. And just that's how, I didn't read it this way for many years, but that's what the Bible says. It says to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love others as you love yourself. So it's very important to love God, love ourselves, and then we have the ability to love others authentically. So 8 years ago, I feel like the light, I would say kind of like the soul light, was kind of covered and kind of sputtering. Like it was having water thrown on it all the time, and it was like sputtering. And really, I just feel like now I'm focused on living brighter 1% a day, and just living brighter and letting my light shine in a way that empowers others to let their light shine. And everyone's light is a little different color and a little different way. And I think that is so cool and beautiful. And so really, I think what makes my light shine brighter is just taking care of my soul, like connecting with it and just being authentic and allowing that freedom. And that allows us to live brighter all the time. So 8 years ago, I was overly kind, but I wasn't authentic because I wasn't really telling the truth about who I was and what I liked and what I didn't like. And I would have never thought that that was like kind of lying in one sense by not telling the truth. I would have thought that was kind. And now my focus is not on kindness, but it's on being real and authentic and being honest about my thoughts and feelings and desires, and making room for other people's honesty about their thought, feelings, and desires. Before, I would not tell myself the truth about how I felt and I thought, and I would not make necessarily conscious choices. I had a lot of just subconscious beliefs and automatic programming running the show. Now, I tell myself the truth of how I think and feel, no matter if I like it or don't like it. I just allow myself to tell myself the truth and be honest with myself and then process that. So before, I was unconsciously going through the motions, and now I'm conscious about how my mind works. And remember, our mind works as we have circumstances, and they're neutral. Everyone would agree on those circumstances. But then we have thoughts about those circumstances. And it's the thoughts about those circumstances that affect our feelings, which affect our actions, which affect our results. And a lot of times what I was doing before, it was saying the circumstance is what is affecting my feelings. Or I would create better feelings by changing my thoughts when I wasn't really being honest about like my thoughts. I'd be like, okay, we're just going to focus on the good so I can have good feelings. But I wasn't really allowing myself to process those thoughts and be like, hey, why am I thinking? Why might I be thinking that? And allow for thoughts that were like in the closet thoughts. And so I really wasn't telling myself the truth and conscious about my thoughts and willing to dissect them and understand how it works. And now I'm always looking at like, how is my brain working, and what is this thought pattern, and what are the results, and is that the results I want, and why are these thoughts important to me? So very conscious about that. Before, I used to attract people that were takers, very much on the narcissistic scale, and I was like the kind girl bullseye. Now I attract more like-minded people, and I love it. It's so fun. Before, I was definitely of the belief that I was not enough, and I definitely put others above me. And now I am of a belief that I'm more than enough, and it's because God loves me. Before, I had a very weary soul and a weary body. And now, again, like I'm soul attentive and I care for it. Before, I would take responsibility for others' emotions. If my husband was upset at me or, in a state, then I would take responsibility for that. And that did not have great results. Now I have love and respect for other people's journeys. I don't take responsibility for their feelings or where they're at. I give them the space and the respect to process their own journey. And if we're in a relationship, we work through those relational dynamics, but I definitely don't take responsibilities for other people's feelings and thoughts, and I do take responsibility for my own feelings and thoughts. Before, I was definitely more of a victim mentality and, what was happening to me. And now it's more of an ownership. Like, hey, I was actually part of the problem. I need to own that my decisions are leading to this result, and I need to own being part of the solution. And so victim to ownership. Before, I was trapped in my own thinking and beliefs. Now, I'm not as attached to my beliefs, and I'm very open to other people believing different and giving them the freedom to be that way. Before, I was very uncomfortable with silence. I was uncomfortable being by myself for long periods of time. Now, I use silence and alone time to teach me, to show me what I may not want to hear, what I may not be listening to, and also have used it for that, my time to refresh. Before, I basically was increasing my own suffering, and now I'm understanding life and how things work and how our mind works and working with it. Before, I had very sacrificial love. Now I have an abundant love. I have love coming from just a healthy belief system that's creating abundance in love, and I'm giving out of abundance rather than sacrificially at my own cost all the time. Before, I was very stuck. And very stuck by my beliefs and ideas. And as you can see, the list on that side was quite a list. And now it's all growing, and it's all part of growing. And I leave room for growth because I have not arrived, nor will I ever arrive. So that I leave plenty of room for all of that. So that's kind of the difference between that overly kind to empowered kindness. And there's a lot more about this in the Unraveled notebook, and that's on Amazon, and that is a workbook that kind of takes us through that overly kind to empowered kindness. And also, I really love it when you guys reach out to me, and you can reach out on livebrighter.info on the website. And it's really cool to see your stories of how you're going from overly kind and suffering to empowered kindness and the beauty of that journey. And that's what I desire for all of us. And that's why I do this podcast, is because, as you can tell, that was a very challenging place for me, and now it's like a very empowering place, and that's what I hope for all of us. So live brighter 1% a day, and I believe in you. Make it a great day.